Our origins don't define our destiny. Our determination does.